Renee, it's great to see you and like 2 days in a row. What a joy.
Yes, I
And
know.
and I just want to thank you again from all of us here in Greece with Democrats Abroad Greece for joining us last evening at what was a fabulous Kafeneion with a discussion of the book Caste, so important. And as one of our members put it, being like in the room with you, even virtually, was like being in a pinball machine where we're going here and there, but everybody's following the ball and wow, and it was just magical. And we thank you.
Of course. Well, we did cover a lot of topics. I'll run through my presentation again and we'll try to go over some of the things that we talked about. There were so many great questions. And I think that, first of all, I would just like to say thank you and your group for all that you guys are doing to, help the democratic efforts abroad. There's no question that the world is a really scary place these days. And I think that there are a lot of people like me who are lifelong Democrats who are really, really scared. I've never been in a situation like this, in this sort of where we find ourselves. And it's, I know what the game plan is. It is to overwhelm us with all of this just chaos. And it's working because like so many others, just feel completely overwhelmed. And so, what was so great about last night, and I'll try to explain a little bit today, what was so great is just this idea that, first of all, we're not alone. I think that we can get sometimes in our heads and we start feeling like, does anybody else feel like this? Is anybody else hearing me? Is it just me? Am I the one who's losing my mind? That kind of thing. But I think just the group together made us feel less alone. And there is safety and efficacy in numbers. So I think that as we move forward, we have to remember that we can really accomplish a lot, in a group. So we have to continue on with these learning sessions, with these chatting sessions, and the efforts that you guys are doing with Cafe and just keeping it all going, keeping our eye focused on the ball and what's happening and being aware. Sometimes it's easy to just kind of feel like you want to check out, but we don't have that luxury right now. So, yeah. So I know you guys read the book Caste. We had sort of talked about it. I think we talked about it the last time I was with you guys. And so I just put together kind of a real quick presentation and I'll share it with you mostly because I feel like a lot of what a lot of what we're seeing now. Uh-oh, are you seeing the right screen? Are you seeing the presentation? Okay, good. Um, I'm concerned because it feels like a lot of what we are seeing played out every day is a result of what Elizabeth Wilkerson talked about in her book Caste. I believe this was Pulitzer Prize winning. I know she won one for The Warmth of Other Suns, but can you imagine winning not one but two Pulitzers? And yeah, so anyway, this one is very different from her other book, The Warmth of Other Suns. This one really is about the looking at how caste plays out even in unspoken ways in our lives. So we know we're familiar with the caste system in India, perhaps the most famous caste system. And of course, the Nazi Germany used a caste system as well during its horrific acts during World War II. And what Wilkerson is saying is that the same framework can be applied to African Americans in this country. So this discussion is
Interrupt you
understanding.
for a second, Renee. I'm sorry, but something that I didn't know when I read this book, and I read it for the first time. And as I
Mhm.
said last night, I had to keep putting it down. As a white person, just I'm shocked because I don't know this history. But what
It's
really
overwhelming.
shocked me the most was how the Nazis they developed their
Yes.
system based on the US model of how the United States
Yes.
systematically was treating Black people.
Yes. You
And
know,
that just,
I
I didn't
it
know that before.
it's mind blowing, isn't it? I'm gonna hang on one second, Gina. I'm gonna go right back into this, but I need to I need to be able to see my notes too. All right, here we go.
Okay.
Um, yes, I have to tell you, that was actually one of my big like gasping moments was to find out that the Nazis actually, and that the what's worse is that there were even things that were done during chattel slavery that they said, oh, that's too harsh. We can't do that.
That's too much even for them. And
Yes, yes, it's
so
insane. Yeah. All right. So anyway, so understanding caste in America, it's a discussion of Isabel Wilkerson's Caste. And we talk a lot about Juneteenth and the delay of I mean, that's what we were talking, we had kind of pinned this presentation on. It was around Juneteenth. And the recognition of Black freedom. The thing that is interesting to me about caste is it also looks into who has a right to call themselves an American? And what does that look like? And what we're finding through social media and you know, prior to social media, we weren't seeing it a lot in a lot of books, but we're finding out that this really is a diverse melting pot. And even though people would say that, I don't think they really believed it. I don't think they really believed it.
no,
Yeah. So, yeah. Um, all right. So, moving along here. So, here are the sort of core points from Caste. Caste is the bones, race is the skin. So, when you think about this as a human body, we know that the skin is just this sort of over covering, but it's stretched over the bones. The bones are what hold the system in place. And so she is comparing this, you comparing caste to this. She reveals how the caste really is the underlying structure, and race is the visible cue. So without the skin, we wouldn't know what caste people belong to, is sort of what she's saying. That the race and the color of the skin is what denotes the caste system and where you belong. The power, another really big point that she talks about is, and we are seeing this even today, is this the power of the dominant group, the anxiety that is caused by that is this great replacement theory. They're worried about, and we heard this a lot in right-wing media, this great replacement theory. They're coming in to take your jobs. They're going to, which then gave them an opportunity for the next point to scapegoat marginalized groups because they could take that and say, they're evil because point right before here, they're coming to take our jobs, the great replacement theory, which creates this anxiety. And then the what she also brings out is the price of caste is a collective loss. She draws parallels between Nazi Germany and Jim Crow America. That's one of the things that we were just talking about. But she talks a lot about how caste really impacts it's not just the marginalized people, it's all of society that somehow gets impacted by it. And when you think about that, if you've ever had an opportunity to live and work in a diverse community, you know how incredibly enriching that can be because you're learning things that are different from you and about people who are different from you, and just how just enriching and fulfilling that is. But under a caste system where everybody stays in their own sort of levels and layers, you don't get that same kind of reward. You don't get that same reward.
you don't get that interaction because it's forbidden or looked down on upon.
Exactly.
And
100%. Yes. So, caste versus race, she talks about as a paradigm shift. Race, what we just talked about, is the visible agent of the unforeseen caste. This is really one of her most quoted lines. She uses, like I said, the metaphor of the human body. The caste is the skeleton, but the race is the skin. And the caste regardless of the skin, denotes how people act within the caste system. And it's kind of a deep concept, but when you think about it, like during Jim Crow, you would know that people who were of the lower caste system, so African Americans, they knew instinctively to not gather on the sidewalks in groups of more than two, that you would have to step off the sidewalk if a white person was coming toward you, that sir and ma'am were always, used. So their rules of engagement were dictated by the caste that they were in. Beyond individual
Of course,
prejudice,
if I may jump in again,
of
everyone
course.
who was in the privileged caste, the white caste, which
Mhm,
of course I'm obviously a member of,
mhm.
uh, they thought it was their right to do that. Like it's
Correct.
your God-given privilege to have that sidewalk to yourself
Mhm.
or that
That's
drinking
right.
fountain to yourself.
That's
And that
right.
all these rules to separate people and to scapegoat and
Yep.
denigrate people were all designed to make white people not see African American people
Yeah.
or anyone of color as a person. You're
Yeah.
dehumanizing people. And the
Precisely.
only way this works is if in my opinion, the dominant caste goes along with it and
Yeah,
sees that as, we have to do that because
for sure.
it's whatever. Um,
For
but we
sure.
don't have to go
And
along with it.
right. And so, and I talk about that a little bit later. She does also talk about that as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So we have beyond individual prejudice. This is one of the things that, it always kind of makes me crazy when I see people talk about reverse racism, because racism is a systemic or a systematic um, prejudice. So we all have our own prejudices. We all have our own biases. But when you are a member of a dominant caste and can then codify your hate, you can codify you put these rules in place that are based on your hate, your racism, your bias, your prejudice. That's then how you end up with racism. That's the racism has a systemic structure to it, which is why there cannot be a reverse racism. Um, Elizabeth Wilkerson also talks about, and I'm sure you've seen this too in some of your well-meaning friends, they don't mean anything by it, but the fact that they don't know tells you a couple of things. Number one, how pervasive the caste system is, and number two, that they really haven't looked that hard. Doing this work, and it's called work because it is work, and doing this is, takes someone taking a good hard look at themselves, being committed to being wrong and working toward change. But not everybody wants to do that. That's hard work. They'd rather rest on their laurels and say, well, there's something, you're looking at this wrong, or you're wrong about this. Or of course I'm not racist. That's a favorite one of mine. I'm not racist. I'm a nice
Mhm.
person. You can be a nice person and still believe in systems like that uphold white supremacy, because you just haven't looked deeply enough at it and you don't care to. So, and
Well,
then
and
of course,
anytime I hear a person, including myself, and I think we all tend to do it, and I do it sometimes, I try not to, but still, when we start talking about a group of people as they,
correct.
they are like this, and
Yes,
this is just the classic. You are lumping a whole group of people together
that's
without
right.
seeing anybody's individuality, without
Correct.
seeing your own why you're doing that, because it
Right.
gives you the excuse to take that to the next level. And if it's a they can then become the other, the
Yep.
enemy, the bad guy. It's their
Exactly.
fault.
It's
My
really
life would be
easy.
so much better if only they
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
It's really, I mean, that's a really good point. That places a very large burden on the member of that group. So, for example, and if you're an African American and you're working in your first job and everybody's worked with everybody in the office is white, you're the only one. there's a lot of undue stress that is placed with that, because now you're carrying the burden of an entire people, right? And you're just out there, I'm just trying to be Renee and get my job done. But in these people's minds, because they are not familiar or have circles that are fairly closed off, they don't know. So you become the window, one person becomes the window into how all Black people act or what have you, which is why I'm a big proponent of accuracy in the media. That's really, really critical in advertising, in all kinds of areas. Even Gina, you and I, when we worked back in Birmingham a million years ago, and I can remember a story from my Birmingham days in the newsroom. People literally would put this would be in the copy. Police are looking for a Black male suspect. And I would be like, that is nothing. But it's important to have someone like me in that newsroom to bring attention to that, because someone else might not see that. So those are the
But I think it's
reasons.
enough to say he's Black, a Black male, and that'll give you your suspect.
Exactly.
But what it
Exactly.
actually does is that every white person
Yep.
is looking at every Black person
Correct.
suspiciously, even more so.
Yep.
And
Yep.
a Black person will have no idea what this person's supposed to look like.
Exactly.
Neither will a white
Exactly.
person, but that's the
Exactly.
point.
Yep.
You're only looking at the skin color and in this case, gender.
Exactly.
So it's
Yeah, that
useless
was a bit,
information.
yeah, that was a big pet peeve of mine. Um, Wilkerson talks about the 8 pillars of caste. And as we're looking through this and going through this, I'm just curious if any one thing kind of stands out to you. She identifies these pillars of caste. So the first one is divine will and natural order. That's the belief that the caste hierarchy is somehow blessed or ordained by a higher power.
Yeah.
Um, Heritability is your place in the hierarchy, that it's inherited at birth. So we see that in the caste system in India, where if you're a Dalit, you and all of your offspring are Dalits. Or if you're a Brahmin, the Dalits are the street sweepers and the latrine cleaners, or the Brahmins who were the teachers and the religious men, whatever you call them. I can't think of
Yeah.
the name of them. So that's it. Yeah. So once that status and that caste has been established, you remain there. Um, Endogamy, that's the control of marriage. We saw that in this country, right? Up until 1967, it was forbidden to marry, at least in terms of black and white. Oh, I went back. I there we go. You couldn't, there was interracial marriage, was
No,
forbidden
absolutely
until,
forbidden until Loving versus, I
uh
forget the Supreme Court case. I find it
Virginia, I
completely
think,
ironic
right?
that
Yeah.
one of our Supreme Court justices, who is so MAGA, has an
Yes.
interracial marriage. But
Yes, he
it just
does.
is a really, I don't even want to talk about Clarence
Yeah.
Thomas because he
And
lost
he's
me
the
in his
and that's the
confirmation
least of,
hearings.
right. And that's the least of the offensive things about him. There are many, many, many
Many,
more,
many
but
more.
yes, yes. Purity and pollution. So this is physical and spiritual proximity to the lower caste is considered contaminating, and the separation is strictly enforced. I think in this book she talks about like if you're in the lower class, if you're a Dalit, you're not even supposed to be in the upper class can't even share a shadow with you, or can't be downwind of you, or something like that. There are some things like that in there because it's that big a deal, the purity and population piece. Occupational hierarchy, I just touched on that. That's the Brahmins are the highest caste, teachers, and then the next one I can't think, but they're perhaps the laborers, and maybe that's a third. But anyway, read the book, you'll find all the all the caste.
Yes, I definitely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dehumanization and
But we
stigma.
see it enforced even, with, certain jobs were forever and forever in the United
Yes.
States. First, they were all forbidden
Yep.
for anybody who wasn't a white male.
Yes.
And then certain, women slowly could
Yes.
do more occupations, but
Yep.
just keeping people of color down through lack of educational
Yep.
opportunities or just not hiring a person who was
Absolutely.
qualified because of their skin color. And I
Exactly.
think we
Yeah.
still see this
Yeah.
today,
True.
and it's
Yeah.
increasing
Yeah.
again.
The dehumanization and stigma. So the lower castes are, and that's really something that we're seeing played out now a lot and what's happening in Los Angeles and around the country with regard to ICE and the people that ICE is going after. It's easy to dehumanize, and it makes it easier for people in the upper caste to make them targets of their ire and inhumanity because they've, dehumanized them and stigmatized them. Terror as enforcement, seen that played out. This idea that you can't walk the street without the idea that somebody could snatch you off the street unidentified and send you to a black hole in a third world country. And then inherent superiority versus inferiority, and that's the belief that those at the top are naturally superior. I think Donald Trump even said something about his family being from Germany this years ago. But he
Mhm.
believes it. So like he was like, we're big brained because we're German or something like that. But of all of these items, a very large sort of thing that I see that runs through this is religion. Religion comes in with the divine will and natural order. The heritability, the hierarchy, that it's placed on you through birth. Purity and pollution. I mean, we saw that a lot in Nazi Germany. They viewed
Mhm.
and were able to stigmatize Jewish people because they would be like they're unclean, comparing them to rats and that kind of thing, which then, of course, made it easier to carry out these most horrific acts.
Yeah.
So the global parallels that's cast across cultures. So in the United States, we have a race-based caste system. The roots are obviously in slavery and then in segregation. In India, this is an ancient birth-based hierarchy with formal religious foundations. And then, of course, Nazi Germany, that came in, it was a state-sponsored, state-engineered with, using it as a means to an end that targeted Jews and other minorities. In contemporary politics, it's interesting that we had talked about this book a while ago, and now we're seeing this really, really ramp up, and we're seeing it in real time. And it's making so many people anxious. But the people, I talked about this last night, this book I'm reading called The Black Christ, because I have had such a difficult time understanding how white evangelicals can carry the mantle for this president and be okay with these horrible things, snatching people off streets and sending them to El Salvador, and now we know the administration came out and said that they actually know that like a quarter of these people, only a quarter, are have some sort of record, that three-quarters of them were just brown people. And yet somehow none of the evangelicals are speaking out about this. And so I was reading this book because I'm like, please, desperate for somebody to help me make sense of this. And this book really talks about the difference being that the Jesus that white evangelicals worship is more of a get out of jail free card. That's how they view Jesus. So once you have accepted him as your Lord and Savior, you can go back to being really not being very nice, and you're okay because you've been washed by the blood of Christ.
Yeah, we call
And
it fire insurance in the
yeah,
Southern Baptist Church that I grew up in. So It's just, once saved, always saved. So it doesn't matter what you do
Right.
anymore, but you're not going to hell,
Right, right,
according
right.
to their
Exactly.
doctrines.
Exactly. And then so in the Black Christ, this is a very different model from white evangelicism in that Black people really look at Christ as something that is an integral part of our everyday life, that we lean on Christ, that we get, divine inspiration from Christ. In other words, it's not a one thing and then it's done and gone. And so that difference has, I think, made it a little clearer to me, at least in understanding how white evangelicals are okay with going back to being really nasty because, as you said, they have fire insurance. Whereas Black Americans who worship, Christ, and also I think atheists feel that same kind of listen, you have, you know, you have a job to do, and that is to be a good human. And I don't see that same kind of whatever in white evangelicals.
I mean,
In fact,
I
I
was
feel
raised
like I
in the
see the
Christian
worst.
religion, and I just remember this Bible verse, they shall know you by your deeds. That it's not what you
Mhm,
say, it's how you live your
mhm,
life. And
mhm.
it's mind-boggling to me that
Yes,
anyone can profess to follow the teaching of Jesus Christ and at the
yes,
same time vote for and
yeah,
support the Trump administration and the MAGA
yeah,
movement, which is so
yeah,
clearly
yeah,
racist,
yep,
white supremacist, only for very, very wealthy people. I mean, it just
yeah,
goes on and on and on. And yet, at
yeah,
least according to Wilkerson's theory, which she really convinced me, it even if it's against my best interest,
yes,
financially, for my children's future, we will support this man because
yes,
of our ties to this white privilege
right,
that most white people even deny that they have. That
yeah,
we've come that far
yeah,
as that it's not allowed to be taught in schools correctly in so many
yeah.
places. It's just so dangerous that this history and that the truth is being eliminated.
Well,
So how shall we get better when we're denying our own history
right,
and denying what we've been doing systematically for decades and not decades, 400 plus years?
yeah. Well, one of the things that I do think is played out in that from caste that we do see played out in evangelicism is the group anxiety, the anxiety of the dominant caste. They cannot see a time and don't want to see a time where they work collectively with people who look different from them. That's really what we're seeing is this. And what somebody last night asked if this was kind of the end is this the death knell of race and racism? And I'm not sure. I don't believe so. I hate to even say that, but I don't think so because that anxiety runs deep. And even though, we thought after Barack Obama, we thought we had sort of, all right, we've
We
had a
have
black man.
overcome.
We thought we had overcome. And Barack Obama's election was Trump's election was a backlash really to Barack Obama, and it was fierce and virulent. And that's what we're seeing is white people who the dominant caste who want to go back to the way things were, i.e., make America great again. It wasn't great for us, it wasn't great for a lot of black people, but it was great for them.
And it
And by
wasn't
the
even
way,
great for most white people,
I was
you
just going to
know,
say, and by the way,
but
when
better
they
than
look at
being black,
yeah, when you look at the
and
stats and stuff, people are like, "Oh yeah, it really wasn't that great." That's all. It's all made up. It's all crap. All
yeah.
made up. So anyway, so yes, so the caste anxiety. So we're seeing it played out in border politics. This is huge, right? We're all after
Mhm.
immigration and the anti-immigrant rhetoric and um, immigrants from especially Latin America, Africa, Muslim majority countries are a threat to the social order. And that is exactly why, of course, this president has now banned people from 12 countries, all countries of filled with people of color, that he's now come out and said, we don't want these people in this country. Very similar to the Muslim ban during his first term.
Yeah.
Voting restrictions. This piece here is really troubling. We're seeing it happen in Harris County in Houston. Harris County is Houston. One of the during COVID, I think they were doing mail-in ballots, but they were removing the number of places where you could drop off your ballot. So if you
Exactly.
don't have a car, that they are impeding your ability to vote. And so it's things
Yeah.
like that, gerrymandering. I mean, all of these things that they are using to to decide and shape what they think America should look like. And then, of course,
Well,
there's
what
the
they're doing is affecting a minority rule. And
exactly,
that's where we
exactly
are already.
correct. Yes.
I mean, I like to think that these people are in a minority
Yeah.
and
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I
still,
think you're right. The DEI backlash that we've been seeing, this is a huge part of it. I looked at Pete Hegseth, and every time I see Pete Hegseth, it just reminds me of this guy I used to work with, this incompetent anchor, but everybody loved him. He was a good-looking white guy, and management loved him because he was the biggest kiss ass. And but he was really marginal. He was very, very marginal. And it just the Pete Hegseth piece to me is just a reminder that mediocre mediocre white men end up in a lot of positions where they can do a lot of damage. Pete Hegseth, I believe this is his personal mission to get rid of all this DEI stuff because it makes him look bad. Here's a guy who had every opportunity, education. He had all kinds of things. Now we find out he's like been married 3 times. He's, a guy who's drinks probably too much. I'm not going to say that, no judgment here, but I'm just saying that he replacing like a 4 or 5 star general and put in a 3 star general as the head of the
well,
Joint Chiefs. It's like, really?
I'm coming right out as saying that any person of color who's been awarded a military honor or has been treated as a hero didn't deserve it because it was only
Yeah,
because of DEI. And
yeah,
this is just
yeah,
complete trollop.
yes,
Sorry,
yeah,
I won't use
yeah.
worse curse words tonight. But
But yes, yeah, but you're absolutely right. Yes. So that's the premise of the book. And then the thing as we close, and then you and I can have do a couple of questions here. But the thing about Caste is like a lot of things, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because you know, you are, I believe, obligated at that point to do better. I can't remember who said it, but know better, do better. But you now we have an obligation to look at it, to look how do we fix it? How do we enlighten others? What can we do ourselves to affect change in that way? Breaking out of silos. This is huge right now because of media and social media specifically, but it's super easy to get in our silos and surround ourselves with our amen choir and not learn at all or not hear about other people's uh, life experiences or, like you said, picking up Caste and having to put it down several times because as a white woman, you were like, I just didn't even know. I had no idea. So these are the kinds of things is that you've got to, the idea that you even picked up the book and looked at it made it, you broke out of your own silo. And it made you then go back to this first point is once you see it, you can't unsee it. And now what's next? So the next thing is taking responsibility. And the thing I like about this last part is that, taking responsibility means that, you hear people say, well, I never owned slaves. No one in my family owned slaves. So how can I be held responsible for slavery? You don't have to, we're not asking you to self-flagellate and pay reparations from your money. But what we are asking is that you know that you recognize your privilege and then figure out, now, how can I use that to make it more fair and equitable in society? And I always use the example of, you buy 100-year-old house and let's say it has copper pipes and whoo, look at that. You've got these great, great pipes. You weren't there when the house was built, but you are still benefiting from it. So
Yeah,
how it's the same thing with Caste. How can you may not have been there when it started, but you are a recipient of what it is now, and so how can you do better? Yeah.
exactly. And that is the big question. How can we all do better? And, I'm the kind of person I would love to take that magic wand and it is gone today. And,
Hmm.
it's not like it never existed because it
Yeah.
did, but now everybody knows and everybody's doing better and we're not falling for these tropes and this, the lies of the president every
Yeah, but
day and
the
our
hard
own
part
lies
is,
to each other.
yeah, the hard part is though, Gina, is a lot of people are still believing this and are still falling for these tropes because you have to want to step outside of your silo. You have to want to learn. You have to have something in you that's like, okay, this can't be right. And
Mm.
my sort of, I guess, prayer or earnest, thought is that people be convicted by what they're seeing, that they actually, I don't know what you want to call it, if you're a person of faith, the Holy Spirit. If you're not a person of faith, maybe just the idea that this is wrong, your moral compass, that would come in and people would say, this is crazy. What are we doing? And there, I believe there are, you know, the majority of people voted for this man. I don't know why. Maybe some voted because they just needed, they really did want eggs to be cheaper. But going from cheaper eggs to sweeping people up off the streets with no due process and throwing them in a dark hole is quite the jump, quite the leap. And so I want to believe that the people who just wanted cheaper eggs cannot be okay with this. And so what are they doing? So yeah, yeah.
Think that
But my,
some of them are believing that they are getting cheaper eggs, even though they're not. They continue to deny the
yeah,
reality that is right in front of their face.
yeah, yeah.
And I kind
But
of
even if you're
have
getting
not
cheaper
found a way
eggs,
to reach them.
right? Even if you're getting cheaper eggs, are you okay with this price? Because the cheaper eggs is one thing, but the price in human lives is like, are you good
Yes.
with that?
But that is the point. These people, now I'm doing it. These people, those who are supporting Donald Trump and
Yes,
believing every word he says, they are being carefully told that, but these aren't people. These are
right,
criminals. These are
right,
animals. They're all evil. They're
right,
all, and it's not true. It's
right,
absolutely not true.
right,
But
right, right.
because that's the only message they're getting in their silo. And I
Yeah,
don't know how we or me, because this is not your job to do that. I think it's the job of white people to be reaching out to white people and saying,
yeah,
hey, where'd you get that idea from?
right,
And it has
right.
to be done, at least this is my theory, somehow in a spirit of love
Yes,
that's not acrimonious and you horrible bad person.
right, right,
But
right.
at the same time, a part of me is starting to think you are a horrible bad person
Yeah,
because you cannot
yeah,
see how evil it is to
right.
take a mom and her two little kids, one of whom who's getting cancer treatment, and send them off to a country where they've
Yes,
never been, or
right,
just all these awful things, and it's
right.
just wrong, and that they're being taught to believe that makes me safer.
Yeah, yeah. And
No.
and so that's the part, I guess, is that, like, first of all, one of the things that has been really troubling to me, and I just posted it today, is watching him in the in at Fort Bragg talk about these things and watching these Fort Bragg soldiers in uniform cheering him was mind-blowing to me. I grew up in a military home. This was what? Never.
It's just
And
forbidden. They're not allowed to do this,
right is
but they
forbidden.
are.
And so I don't, that was troubling to me. But just this idea, like I have a really, really, really good friend. And I'm like, I mean, we were friends growing up in like eighth grade. And I am scared to ask her feeling about this because I'm scared of the answer. Like, so I'm scared that if I say, "Are you okay with this? Is this like," and she comes back with a, in so many terms or so many words, yeah, yeah, I mean, he's the commander in chief. And then I would be like, oh God. And I've known her since we were 14. So it's like,
Yeah.
what would I do? Like, I don't know. That's my, sort of burden lately these days is like, how do you,
And Renee, I wanted to ask you, excuse me, just because I kept
Mhm.
thinking last night, how do you do this? How do you retain your professionality, your loving spirit, your curiosity, and deal with all of us white people who are still, not with the program, who are still trying to, whether intentional or not, it's like you really do an amazing job of taking away
Oh,
some of the threat. And yet I wonder,
oh,
don't you get fed up with us and like,
I don't. First of all, like for you, for when I was years ago traveled to Europe, 1,000 years ago, one of the things that I noticed was that if people saw you trying, they would cut you some slack. They would give you some grace if they saw that you were at least making an effort. And that's how I feel. If I see people in my circle who are white and they are trying to do better, they are trying to learn, they are trying to be better people, trying to be more aware, I'm going to cut them some slack. I'm going to cut them, I'm going to extend grace. And I always feel like I want people, and to know that they could always come to me, and that, that is obviously for you as well. But if they're not clear on something and they're like, "Hey, I just want to make sure that I'm not offending anybody. Do you think, and how does this sound?" Like, a lot of people don't know things like, and I can't remember if we talked about this before, Gina, about black hair and
Mhm.
people coming up and wanting to touch your hair and why that's such a, no, that's such a no-no. But a lot of people don't know that. And I think a lot of times we have removed, social media has removed a bit of a personal barrier, um, and made us a little less formal. And that, oh, this is somebody I know. And oh, your hair is so cute. So if I can touch it because it's cute, it's okay, right? It looks adorable. It's different from mine. So, but that's offensive because I'm not your dog. You don't pet me. You don't, right? And also, it's the same way like when I was pregnant and people come up and touch your stomach, you're like, pardon me, this is my personhood, right? You don't
Yeah.
get to just come on and start, palpating me. So yeah,
Oh, I could talk with you just for ages and ages, but we've
yeah,
taken so much of your time. I'm just wondering
yeah.
your general impression of the the value of these small group conversations. Is
Mm,
that the way forward? And
mm,
for our members here in Greece, so we
yeah.
have such most of us do not see many uh, people of color,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I'm not allowed to talk about
Yeah,
the
yeah,
aspect of racism in Greece
yeah,
itself or in other
yeah.
countries because we're not supposed to do that. But
Oh,
I do hear among
really?
my
Oh,
Greek
wow.
friends
Yeah.
conversations like, "I'm so glad I've got pale skin." This whole skin color thing is
Uh-huh.
definitely also present
Oh,
beyond the
wow.
United States, but it's a
Oh, that's
different
interesting.
kind of thing.
Mm,
And
yeah.
before I forget, that was a thing in Caste that I had also not thought of, that it's in the United States that this whole concept of being Black was first
Right.
introduced.
Right. Yes.
I just never thought about it.
Right.
That, of course, if you were
Yep.
coming from whatever country or tribe in Africa as a slave, people
Yeah.
were not thinking of themselves by their skin
Yes.
color. They were
Ex
identifying by their group or tribe or
exactly.
location or whatever.
Right,
And that this
exactly. Like
whole
you'd be Ghanaian or you would be whatever, Nigerian or, that Egyptian or what, right, exactly. But
yeah,
but they, And I believe, and I'm going to get back to your small group question in a second, but I do believe that what happened with making people black and white is pretty much in keeping with how the United States has handled race, period, with, ham-handed and clumsily. And so they used white to unite the planter class and the upper class. They had nothing in common, right? But except their white skin. So, if you are an educated black person, you still were under an uneducated white person because of what? White supremacy. Because you were white, you were supreme. Um, and then black, like you said, we became black when we left Ghana or Somalia or the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it has been, I think, very clumsily handled by the United States, and it just is, and it continues to be.
Yeah.
Regarding your question about the small groups, I actually do believe that there is tremendous value in what you guys are doing. Um, it's important to create safe spaces for us to have difficult conversations. And last night was so amazing. And I think that part of it was because we were able to speak freely without, fear that, someone was going to be offended or whatever. That's critical. We have to be able to come to the table with all of our stuff and then say, listen, I just don't know. Can somebody help me? Can we talk about this, together? Can we work through? And that was the whole point of the gathering yesterday. It was, where do we go now? What do we do? And sadly, they're I don't know. We don't, the answers aren't real clear. But we do know that we have to keep trying. And that's what you guys are doing. So,
And so are you. You are amazing. And we look forward already to the next time we can finagle
yay,
you to come
of
back and speak with
course.
us and just ask you to keep safe. And we don't know how all this is going to play out over there, but I think I can speak for all of us here. If you need a place,
All
we'll help
right.
you.
Yes. All right.
Because
Greece, Greece,
it's,
here
as
I
you said at the
come.
beginning, it's a scary time. And I think one way that gets us through it is to talk and
Yeah.
to share that closeness and to not give up. And we will
Right.
not give up. We will not give
Exactly.
up.
Oh, Gina,
And
thank you so much.